Good morning, good evening to you, beautiful friends, wherever in the world this finds you. Brothers, sisters, cousins, however you want to identify. I finally had to just kind of jump on and make this happen. And I swear to you, it's almost like demons. The demons are trying to stop me. Because I kid you not, I'm at a cemetery right now. And not one, but two people have pulled up, and I quite literally, as opposed to like going to the trails or the woods, I figured for sure this has got to be the place where like I'm gonna get some quiet, right? It's gonna be great. And no, it's apparently it is not meant to be, and maybe it's a sign. Maybe the universe is trying to be like, actually, maybe you should put a pin on that, girlfriend. But I don't necessarily believe that. I think that anything that is worth doing is worth doing well and is worth potentially having to overcome some opposition and some challenges. As I get distracted and see some little red ants kind of going and check it out, my little picnic blanket. I tell you, I'm going to keep on keeping on, and we'll see how long this goes, and who knows. But I hope that this finds you so well. I am fantastic. And I had to step back for a minute because I'm not always fantastic. I mean, I am. I make a point to be accountable and to be mindful for that. But that's just kind of my way of, when things are sucking, embracing the suck and dancing through it, if you will, finding momentum, etc. But I'm going to jump on in because, again, I got some ants going and I don't have a whole lot of time. But this is just, it's been on my spirit, and I've really just kind of felt like it needed to be said and addressed. So here we go. Um, Amongst other things, we're going to have some uncomfortable conversations, kids. And I'm going to start with, first and foremost, I love you, and I don't necessarily think myself above this. It's the royal we. The best I can do is be incredibly aware and mindful of these things. And so then I work on myself to make sure that I'm not necessarily perpetuating these kind of dynamics, etc. And then I speak on it to other people. No shame, no judgment. It's crazy because in introducing these topics, people can feel a way. And so I have to be incredibly selective. It has to be a very long process of rapport building and connecting for me in regards to getting to know people. And it's unfortunately very, very complicated because I am always striving to be my most authentic self and representing myself and not necessarily censoring and what have you, but then also like honoring the other person and their own experience. Sorry, you're going to see me move around a lot because, as I said, I'm outside and ants are coming. Not terribly, but they're curious, and I understand, but I don't want to, deal with them up close and personal. So anyway, I digress. Bunnies eat butts. And yeah, we're gonna have uncomfortable conversations. So trigger warning, spoiler warning. That's why I do this, because you don't have to necessarily have these uncomfortable conversations with your loved ones. And please don't shoot the messenger and don't be angry at me, because I'm doing this from a place of love, because it just seems like we're not necessarily holding space and having these conversations and comfortable doing these things. So it's worth a look, and it's definitely worth taking a peek in consideration. Oh my gosh, I just realized that I have an Elfwood's tin of mints just sitting out. No wonder they're just like, I smell yums. So that's probably why. So, okay. Bunnies eat cigarette butts. Um, as a former smoker, I used to, once upon a time, not necessarily be the most mindful. And this will bleed over because I'll probably talk about even litter at some point, and maybe even in this video. But I definitely used to not necessarily care. And then I learned that bunnies, adorable fluff, kind of dumb. I mean, come on, you see them all the time, just on the side of the road. The murdery ones. Hi, little bug friend. It's awful. I'm kind of, I guess, I don't want to say racist. Classist in regards to my bugs, because there's some kind of little bug that is not an ant, and I'm like, yeah, you can hang out, but the ants, I'm like, go away. I swear to God, this person is still in their car, and so is the other person. And I'm just like, what are you doing? You know what? Whatever. I just need to mind my own business. But we are, as a society, failing to do that at this point. But I digress. Bunnies eat cigarette butts. So, this is a loving call in. Tell all your friends. They're cute, they're kind of dumb, and they can't help themselves. And a lot of times they absolutely eat butts that are flicked everywhere. So, please be mindful and considerate and try not to just flick them everywhere. In regards to littering, too, like I said, as a kid, I used to treat the earth like my trash can. Nowadays, I'm older and I get it, and it's not just necessarily even the carbon footprint. Um, per se. It's just the fact that we are not necessarily taking anything seriously. We don't get it. We relinquish our own sovereignty constantly. We perhaps, it's kind of oxymoronic and chicken egg parable, or parable paradox, if you will, both, honestly. Because perhaps at times we struggle to feel connected to source and spirit, we might not necessarily take ourselves seriously. So we don't really give a shit, if that trash makes it into the trash can. So we don't turn around and stop and go pick it up, even. It's not even intentional littering, per se. And then there are people who just don't give a fig and are just like, screw it. And like I said, that when I was a child, when I didn't know better, that was me. So it's complicated. But it is just worth mentioning, loving Colin at this point, especially. Everybody allegedly says that they're like okay with being the a-holes that they are. But then why is everybody else so allegedly so depressed and getting on antidepressants? And then how come when people call them on their poor behaviors, they try to justify, how it is what it is? And it's very interesting because dynamics, engagement, all connections, all encounters are not the same. And I think a lot of people at this point are failing to even potentially deduce that, like to even understand and to see the differences. For a society that loves to disagree, we don't seem to understand nuance very well. I.e., if you, any time you are looking for just the comedy of errors that is my life, of being so sure of who I am and what works for me, and trying to speak on it, um, and sometimes potentially being a bit tricky, if you will. My favorite is vague metaphor and possessive pronoun. Even to speak on something, even to say I, even to actually, like that, if I were to say I, that would actually be out of that territory. But to speak as if I were to support something, or to speak in a way that I do support something, if someone is able to have deductive reasoning, to question, to kind of go further, it it's just wild. It's wild to me because people can't necessarily understand the differences. Like, when a disagreement is a disagreement, like if it's about power, when it becomes about power, etc. And oftentimes, funnily enough, it just seems like that's what most disagreement is. And it's very complicated for me because having a backwards brain, or just being like an inherent contrarian without meaning to and wanting to and not wanting to trigger folks, um, I understand that I kind of fall into that blanket. I disagree. But when one is trying to learn and one is also trying to be mindful that they don't come off disrespectful, and one is also aware that they're coming from their place of understanding, it's wild. It's wild to me because I find that a lot of people these days seem to want to disagree merely to like want to dominate, etc. Like, we all keep lying to ourselves and saying that we're fine, and yet behavior is very telling. If we are fine, then why is disagreement and discord often met with aggression, almost inherently? Riddle me that. It was very interesting. I went for a hike this morning and I posted a short. And my day, it was fantastic. I started off amazingly, had a great hike. And then this guy is on my butt when I'm driving. And he is like on my butt. So I just kind of look in my rearview mirror and I'm like, can you back off? I pantomime. And he doesn't. So I don't speed up. That's rude, that's aggressive, and I think for too long, bad behavior is been rewarded and complied with, etc. So he's like riding me, and I still don't get over. And it literally even comes to a point to where he could get over and just go past me, but he doesn't. So I still kind of keep going, and then eventually I get over, and he follows me and he's like screaming, and he's just like fucking asshole, blah blah blah, swearing. And so eventually we part ways, and I scream out my window at him something not very nice. I say, "See you later, shrimp prick." And I didn't use the P, I used the D. And this is the thing. First and foremost, we should both thank our lucky stars that neither one of us is kind of psycho that wants to, shoot people. But that's just it. Like, yeah, I guess I'm willing to take this as far as you're willing to take this, sir. Because what? Like, it was, well, and here's what I didn't mention. So he was in the left-hand turn lane and eventually actually started to follow me. So that is before I said what I said, to be clear. Because I do want to own, I get it at that point, but I was heated. So I absolutely, like, I pull into a gas station because he's like tailing me, and he acts like he's going to and he doesn't pull in behind me. And I was willing to stand on business on that, because again, dudes don't necessarily understand. And we will go with people, but I'm going to start with dudes because this actually ties in to comment feeds that I had been engaging in just on the YouTubes. It's just crazy to me how so many masculines, and to be very clear, it is not all men. In fact, God bless the men who can just mind their business, what have you. I don't necessarily see men constantly advocating correcting other men's behavior and writing, or even trying to understand women's perspectives, etc. But it is not all men. But the fact that there seem to be so many men who need to flex on women as like part of their masculinity, I just don't understand that. And it's just crazy. Like, it's in the ways that we connect. And to be clear, in this one especially, women do it too, but just in discourse, perhaps because of what you understand or take to someone's meeting. When you come in, you're like, well, actually, blah, 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 blah. It's in the ways that we choose to engage and insert ourselves and ingratiate. And it's just interesting to me how nowadays all of it just seems to be like power dynamics, whatnot. I have turned my back on so much. I don't listen to a lot of music anymore. I don't watch a lot of movies, just a lot of these things. And so many people tell me I'm strange. And yet, funnily enough, prior to this indication, like altercation, if you will, it wasn't even an altercation, but this moment with this gentleman, I am, that's my first crash out I've had in a while. And ultimately, to be clear, like, if he would have gotten out of his car, I just would have been like, dude, what the hell? Like, I'm not necessarily trying to fight you, but if that's what it's going to take, like, if we got to go toe to toe, because it's really creepy and crappy that you were riding my ass. It's rude as hell. And then to, like, start screaming and then, like, trying to overpower me and, like, let's talk about this. Like, are you okay? How can I be of service to you? And it's a gas station. And that's why I pulled into the gas station. So it was, on camera and whatnot, because I was willing to potentially get my ass beat. Now, I'm not just going to take it, to be clear. Like, I would absolutely defend myself. Unfortunately, I've had lots of trauma and abuse in my life. There is no way. I'm an active practicing Buddhist, but I am just not necessarily chill enough to not defend myself or to, like, defend somebody if it were necessary and needed. So I think that is so important to mention because I do sometimes get very distracted and the ants are kind of distracting me and I'm just like, oh, I'm trying to keep it all together. That's already really hard. The executive dysfunction and then the people here and just um, just peopling, I tell ya. And then I don't even want to talk about just the emotional, the physical abuse that I had as life, the sexual assaults that I've, encountered. I'm not trying to be crap. I'm not trying to trauma dump. And that's part of the reason that I don't ever necessarily expand the stories. I would never want to take away from anybody's experience, and my way is only my own. But I am coming to see just every day how the work is actually always just like me versus dark me. Sometimes. um, not it's very complicated because you have to sort of say something and then build on that. Um, and I find, at least for myself, it is me versus dark me. Trying to, and let me be clear, with my path being at least trying to lessen the misery and suffering in the world. A lot of people just want to be like, no, I'm struggling, I'm going through this and that, and blah, 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 this is what I do, what I do. And they don't necessarily choose to do that. I do. Um, I feel like as a society, as we continue to evolve and progress, we're not cavemen anymore. And I think to prove it, moving forward, as we continue to have these fight or flight responses, the adrenals, the fear, we breathe through it. Because again, everything isn't necessarily life or death anymore. There are certain instances, and most of those, unfortunately, are man made. And again, that's because we aren't necessarily okay as a society because of the practices that we support, the ways that we are just not necessarily keeping it real. Like, it's wild to me. So, lone wolf, black sheep, what have you. And let me attest to the fact that, trust me, loners don't necessarily want to be loners. It's not like we want to be by ourselves. Life has happened to us to where, unfortunately, people just haven't been that fantastic. And that's vague because once you go too deep, sometimes it's projecting its own nonsense. But in their life experience, their grief, their own pain, justifying that, just how they choose to cope, what they normalize, and how they treat people, etc. It's wild. It's wild how because someone isn't, that is unfortunately, it's one of those crazy things. Intelligence, strength, those are some of the qualities that everybody loves until they love to hate it when it's counterintuitive. Because 9 out of 10 connections in every set of connections has been someone that has just admired me tremendously and all of the adversity I've overcome and how graceful and how kind and how loving. And you would be amazed that 10 out of 10 times with those 9 out of 10 people, when I can no longer maybe just understand or support because we've been talking about it and I'm seeing, a lack of congruence or essentially hypocrisy, i.e., a lot of the connections in my life that I've aligned with because I understand this life journey kind of, everybody's hurting. And it's my own fault, but it's like, ugh, how do I say, it sounds so grandiose. Well, I trusted people. They said they were hurting. No one's ever helped them, blah, blah, blah. So I show up for them and then they burn me. And everybody says that. I understand that. But then when you look at how they communicate when they relay the stories. Now, I am talking everything from literally even adult sexual abuse, as in one partner quite literally sexually assaulting me past a boundary when I expressly state it's a boundary. I'm talking emotional, mental, physical abuse, as I would see it. Quite literally addressing boundaries, creating boundaries, and having them trespassed upon, attempted gaslighting, just you absolutely name it. And I hate using this language because I don't want to condemn anybody. But as someone who came from narcissistic abuse where my parents needed me to be an emotional caregiver, it has been years of unlearning those patterns and those behaviors. And unfortunately, I'm in my 40s now. I can't help but almost see in a lot of ways how that is quite literally everybody. If, for example, when relating, people can't necessarily be open to multiple perspectives. When it becomes about the ego things, when they can't hear multiple facets of their behaviors, how they're acting, etc. So I've been jabbing a minute. I talk a lot. I've been really trying to talk a lot less and really just observe more. And as I said, unfortunately, I've got things to do. And I really went all over the place, and I understand that. I've just been trying to speak toward a few of the dynamics right now, especially because I feel like it's necessary. Again, like I was saying in comment feeds, it's crazy in a comment feed about revolution and violence, some of the vitriol and the anger and irritation that has been lobbed my way when suing for peace and saying that it doesn't have to be violent. And that's actually even why I speak on like my little road rage issue, because I'm sure there's going to be someone to be like, oh well, that was violent. And people will make what they want to make of things. Was it, or was it quite literally choosing to communicate with the communication that was introduced to me? um so I think it's very strange, as I was saying, even with the gentleman, how in a lot of ways men expect women to back down to them. How can you respect women? Again, how can you say that you think women are your equal? Well, asking me to back down means that you're not necessarily, that you are, thinking that I'm your equal. You're putting myself at a place of betterment. No, not even slightly. But what I'm saying is, why is there aggression, what have you? I'm not coming in all hot and bothered and aggressive and assertive and what have you. And first and foremost, like, I wasn't even talking to you. Just the way that men will oftentimes ingratiate themselves and then potentially get aggressive. And again, I don't want this to even seem like it's like this weird lobbing on men thing, because part of my problem, as I said, is that I've loved plenty of men, and I've loved them enough to understand that most of the time they actually are wanting some weird Stepford that is like, yes, honey, I love you, you're my sweet boy, and then to sleep with them. But then ultimately, and like, let me have feelings, let me be real, let's have an argument, let me disagree with you, and let me perhaps demonstrate in many ways how your thinking could use some adjustment, consideration. Guys don't want to hear that. I'm constantly changing my behaviors. I'm constantly changing my beliefs when introduced to new information. When someone is respectful and is trying to help me learn, etc., not necessarily trying to shut me down and tell me I'm wrong. Like, I love learning new things. And funnily enough, I actually even will hear people out when they're just like, "No, you're wrong because blah 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 blah," because it's their views, their opinion are so important. But I'm going to get distracted because of the beautiful chiming of the bells, and that is my sign to wrap it up. So, just some food for thought, guys, because conflict, resolution, everything is everything, but your ability to just kind of stay level and try to be understanding versus like divisive. Now, more than ever, it's like some of the most sacred work that we can be doing. So I am loving you this day and always. And also, please try to be more mindful of your cigarette butts. Throw away your trash, like, care about things. It's cool to care. Maybe you're sad because you don't feel like you're sacred because you're not doing the things to be sacred and honor your sanctity and your sovereignty. Because when you care and you do the things, it's like, learning to ride the bike. You gotta build the momentum. And it doesn't always start off that way, and it's a work in progress. And certainly not telling you how to live your life. I'm just sharing with you what has been working for me as I continue to show up more empowered and embodied and living my best life. And sure, I'm perceived as angry, and sure, I'm perceived as mad at times, and I'm perceived as this and that. But I tell you what, if you actually engage with me in the 3D, you would get to experience how we are always trying to party and make it empowered and loving, until someone tries to make it a bad time. Because as the saying goes, don't start no shit, won't be no shit. I'm loving you this day and always, and keep on keeping on because you know what? We're all changing the world.